All right.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another interview here. I am Suzanne Hacker. I'm your vacation rental business coach with Welcoming Wow. And I am here today with Michael, and Michael owns a vacation rental in New York. And I'm hoping we can have a great conversation here and share all about his journey. So, Michael, if you want to tell us a little bit about your vacation rental, first of all, and then also what led you to owning one and telling us about your journey today.
Good morning, Susan. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Very excited to share more about our home, how we got there, our journey. So let's start from the top, I guess. Just give you a little brief about the home. You may see in the background there, at least the backyard. Our home is 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It's 2 levels. So we have an upstairs and downstairs. And it's located around the water. So it's Fish Cove that you see in the background there behind my head. And that spills out into the greater Peconic Bay out in Southampton, New York. So you have a nice dock at the very end there where you can park your boat. There's a jet ski there already and a kayak launch. All the goodies are in the garage and ready for our guests to use. So our home is, as you mentioned, in New York. It's about if you're not familiar with sort of the Northeast, the area, it is about a 2-hour drive due east of New York City. So if you get in your car, barring traffic, you'll be in my home in a couple hours, and then you get to see that background instead of the buildings and the noise that I'm looking at here in New York City, where we live with my wife and kids.
Nice.
So I guess I'll give you a little more background about like I said, the location. It's throughout New York City, known as a go-to destination for vacations and just weekend getaways up to month-long stays throughout the summer. But our journey actually started back in 2018 in the spring. It was right after actually we had our first child, our daughter. We lived in the city here. We have a condo here in downtown New York. But with a little one now, we kind of got the itch to get a home with a nice backyard where the kids can play, with the kind of little playground that you may see in the back there, run around instead of being trapped a little bit in an apartment. So that's when we first sort of got this pipe dream of, hey, let's can we get a vacation home, a second home that we can go and really use for ourselves. I mean, that's really where the journey began. It's really let's find a home that we can make our own. And then we kind of backed into the Airbnb that it became over the last several years. But yeah, starting in 2018, it took us a while to find it. We shopped for over a year. A tiny little budget. Like I said, this was after we just got married. We just bought an apartment and just had our daughter. So we had a tiny little budget that we were working with. But we knew we had a certain must-haves. Number one was on the water. We had to be on the water. That was sort of our must-have. It was an important feature, and the reason why is because it's scarce. It's if you think of vacations, you want to be on the beach, on the water. Anybody can throw a pool in the backyard in the woods, but getting an actual body of water that doesn't close up for the winter like that you see in the background is very special. So that was sort of our must-have. And the second really was more pragmatic. If we're going to get a place, it's also going to be an investment. It's a home that we're going to be putting a lot of money in. So location, right? It's real estate. So we decided we want to be out in the Hamptons. I mean, this is the area where you want to be for vacation. We've traveled there before, enjoyed staying. So we figured this would be the place. But everybody that we talked to, all the real estate brokers, on our journey, told us no way, it won't happen. You can't get the home that you're looking for on your budget. But we persevered. I mean, like I said, we didn't let them deter us from our journey, and we pretty much did it on our own. So I've never used a real estate broker, ended up doing everything on my own from starting with a dream back in 2018 up to the closing and everything in between up to now. I do use some brokers to help me rent out the place, but like I said, it's all been on our own.
Nice. And now I realize this is probably not your only job in the world. So what do you do for work then, if you want to tell us about that?
Of course. So out in Long Island, Southampton, I'm an Airbnb host, but out here back in the city, when I travel back, I put my lawyer hat on, and I actually work as an attorney for one of the largest residential landowners in the country. I don't quite do the landlord tenant lease part of it. I do a lot of personal injury defense when somebody gets hurt on a premises. So if somebody trips and falls on my at my house, they would probably get me as a on the other side. I'm a kid. I wouldn't. I
Right?
don't think I would represent myself, but that's my New York City life. Out here, I'm an attorney. My wife's a physician. She works here as well. So we were sort of
Okay.
married and tied to New York City, but that doesn't mean we don't get to get away whenever we can.
So with that hat on, if you will, what would be maybe one piece of advice for vacation rental owners to make sure that they cover themselves for as far as safety in a vacation rental?
I think probably the most important thing is thinking about insurance. And this is, someone may have heard of this, your homeowner's insurance. That's the homeowner's insurance that you have on your home, on your apartment, for your personal use. If you're there and you have a friend visit you for dinner, and God forbid, they slip and fall and break their ankle or something, that insurance would cover you in a regular sort of premises liability situation. But if you, and this is not legal advice, but if you own a home that you're renting out, really, as a business, because we really what Airbnbs are, you want to make sure you get the appropriate liability coverage. So if God forbid something happens to one of your guests while they're staying at your home, they are appropriately covered. And that's it's not as easy as you would think. There's a lot of shopping around and planning, but that's probably one thing that I would suggest people sort of look into and think about after they get started. It may not be the first thing that you look at, but once you have some traction, it's definitely something you want to look into just to make sure you're covered. And so do everything you can, be safe, security first and safety first. But you always want to protect your income stream and investment. I mean, it's two things. It's an income stream and assets. So it's twice as important.
So instead of CYA for cover your ass, it's cover your assets.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I might use that in the future too. All right. So if you could turn back the clock to maybe back when you started or your first year or two, what would be like one piece of advice you might give yourself as you were going through this?
This is gonna come off a little funky, but I would tell myself, Michael, cut down that big tree in your backyard, and probably the rest of them too, because we had about 6 or 7 trees when we bought the property. It's about half an acre lot, and it had nice mature trees. But there was one that was in proximity. Actually, the bunch were actually in proximity of the home. But this one tree, believe it or not, ended up falling down onto our house, putting a hole into our roof and landed right on our deck. If you so look at our deck. This happened during the middle of a month-long summer vacation stay. So this is peak season, August, when our renters are there enjoying their time. Hurricanes which frequent Long Island occurred, and this tree came down. And believe it you me, I was in a car driving in the storm, checking out the damage. Luckily, like I said, the damage to the roof was minimal, and we were able to sort of patch it up and then remove the tree. But it was a couple of days that were very nerve-wracking and stressful, and had to get things done on an emergency basis, obviously, because it's middle of their stay. We wanted them to enjoy, and believe it or not, they stayed throughout the entire ordeal. Like I said, I was out there pretty much for the entire time, cleaning up, making sure it's removed. We got it done in a few days, but. Trees are pretty, and if they are located within a safe distance of your home, all the best. But I would recommend looking at trees, and at the very least, maybe getting them inspected. So I would tell myself, Michael, go get those trees checked out, or cut them down, or something to protect yourself. But it happened. Sure, the rest of the trees came down shortly thereafter. But that's one piece of advice I would give myself.
Nice. Well, and it's fantastic that your guests continued to stay with you. And what kind of a review did they give you?
They were actually, this was a direct booking, but they loved the place. Believe it or not, these guests liked our neighborhood so much. I ended up, they asked me for help to find them their own home in our neighborhood. The home is located in it's not a private community, but it's a closed loop, so you can't drive through the community. It's about 200 homes, 50 on the water. And they loved it so much, the sort of the family neighborhood feel of the home. They were like, Michael, we love it here. We love for you to help us. We want to buy a home here. So I helped them kind of point in the right direction. I wasn't a real estate broker at the time, so I didn't want to engage. But that's for all the feedback I received, I think they had a lovely experience nonetheless with all that. But that's, I think
Awesome.
it goes speaks to the, the fact that we responded the way we did. It's not, a tree comes down and, you don't see the landlord for the next 3 days. And I was there out that night
Right.
in the storm with a flashlight.
Perfect.
And
Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why I originally started to follow you and your vacation rental was I had seen something in another chat on Facebook, I believe it was, where you have over, I don't even know, like maybe 300 stays so far, and you have a perfect 5-star review rating. So tell us a little bit more about that.
yes, I was hoping you would ask. So not that many stays actually. I think I did a count. I went back and did some analytics because I keep track of this on a rolling basis. We have now coming up on 100 stays over the last 3 years almost. We got in November of 19, and our first stay was New Year's Eve of 2019. And this is just the upper level actually, because we were renting only half the home at that time. And then did renovations, so it was sort of off the market for a while, and then it was back on the market for the full property. But yes, so ever since we started, all of our reviews, this is from the first one. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it'll be just a couple that stay with us for a weekend for New Year's Eve. Just upstairs as a small booking, but that's where we started, and ever since, counting 57 on Airbnb now, 5-star. Back to back to back. There's like I said, there's a bunch of, like I said, that's a 90, so there's a bunch of direct bookings in there where the people gave me feedback. So that's one thing I always sort of, it's always crucial to me, regardless of what review you give me. I mean, I want to know the feedback. What can I do to make the experience better? So a lot of the stays that probably would have left reviews were direct bookings that didn't have access to the Airbnb platform. But yeah, in the Airbnb so far, knock on wood, the streak is 57, perfect rating. And I've looked, I did a little research on my own just to kind of see if there's anybody like that. I mean, in our area, if you sort of punch in Southampton, New York, and into Airbnb, you probably get like 2,000-3,000 Airbnbs within east of the canal there. And it's sparse if you try to find. I mean, there's some folks that have like 5-10 reviews. They're all 5 stars, but once you get into like 50, 100, there's a handful. I don't know what it speaks to. Maybe so it may have something to do with what we're doing at the property, but it really it's been a phenomenal experience, and love our guests and all of those reviews. If you sort of go through each and single one, I addressed and replied to in kind, because I'm super grateful for providing the experience that we have to our guests, starting, like I said, back in New Year's Eve 2019 up to just last month. We had a couple of guests that stayed with us and loved it. Love every single minute of it, and we love the feedback. So keep them coming.
Good. So now you mentioned you started with just the upper level, and then you did some renovations so that it's both the upper and the lower. So when somebody books your property, do they automatically have the full home, or can they just book a level?
No, so right now we offer the home. The way it's set up, it is 2 levels, but they are connected via an interior staircase. They have separate entrances, so you can get in, and one person, one family can theoretically walk in and use the front entrance, and then the lower level, which is sort of a mirror image of the upper level, they can walk in from the back, but they're actually connected. So it's we do offer the whole home, but it's often booked by a couple of families. Let's say you're going with your friends, and you both have kids. You want to we'll take the upstairs, you'll take the downstairs. Or extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles. So right now we do offer the whole property. If somebody was interested, in just renting out part, we would never offer sort of split it up and have one couple stay, or one guest stay upstairs and one downstairs, because it is open. Like I said, there is a shutter door, but there's not enough privacy to sort of separate the two spaces. But it provides, like I said, enough privacy if you want to go with a larger party, family members, friends, and the like.
That's awesome. Okay. And so there's 2 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs?
3. So there's 3 upstairs, and there is 1 bedroom downstairs, as well as a kids playroom. So it's officially a 4-family home, but the 4th was a bedroom when we bought it, but then realized it's not, is it's a playroom for kids. So we have a bunch of toys, a changing station, pack and play, all the stuff that you would need if you're traveling with kids. We have kids, so
awesome.
Behold,
That's fabulous.
we have a room specifically tailored for kids, and it's right off the master bedroom. So parents can stay in their master bedroom, and they have an ensuite kids room, so to speak, downstairs. So it's technically 3/1 with an extra space kids room downstairs next to the master.
Okay. Now, I don't think we have yet mentioned what the name of your property is or how people can find it.
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep it very simple. I don't have like some. I'm not very creative by heart, hence end up being an attorney. But it's 29 Waters Edge, which is the address. So if you're traveling and you can't find it, punch into your GPS. It's everything. It's our IG handle at 29 Waters Edge. It's our Twitter handle. Website as well. I mean, I mentioned direct bookings. We have a website, 29watersedge.com. And for a while, I was doing a little homework trying to come up with a sort of a creative name, but it just fits so well. I mean, it has water, waters, edge. I mean, it sort of speaks for itself. It's the name of the street that we're on. So it's apropos, very nice to use it as a name because it says it all. And 29, I guess, is the direction. Except there's a couple of homes on our blocks. So you don't mistake our home.
Nice. All right. So you mentioned Twitter and Instagram, all of those. So do you have a social media strategy? Do you do it all yourself? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm very hands-on. So as I think most folks that I've talked to always rely on either a service for the social or price labs or the likes for their pricing, and maybe a manager or a handyman on site. I do it all myself. So everything from the social media accounts to the OTAs, and we're listed on about a dozen OTAs, to managing relationships with I think over 8 or 9 real estate brokers locally. So all of that personally myself. It's sort of just a philosophy. I approach the business a little differently than some hosts. Very hands-on. I mean, when you pick up the phone, when you text, when you call, when you tweet, you get me on the other side. You don't get an intermediary. You always deal with me. It's sort of what differentiates us from the sea. Like I said, there's literally a sea of properties available along the entire spectrum, price spectrum, everything from a couple $100 weekend stays all the way up to on the water, oceanside properties that rent for, believe you and me, over $1 million for a summer. So that's really how we try to differentiate ourselves, is really make it an experience where it's not a hotel, it's not and there's a lot of even local sort of OTAs and companies and businesses that are in the business of running Airbnbs. You don't get that. You don't get a random person on the phone. You get me. So that's the one differentiator. Do it all yourself. And the main reason is quality control. At the end of the day, I check everything. And when you check into my home, I looked through the home before and after the cleaners left. So it's exactly what you see is exactly what you get, and I'm exactly who you get.
And can you rent it all year round, or is it more just summer, fall? How do you work it?
Very good question. It's actually initially we thought it will just be maybe a summer. I mean, it's a vacation destination that obviously sees a lot of influx of travelers in the summer. But ever since, we've actually expanded our the seasons, typically Memorial Day to Labor Day, and then Tumbleweed Tuesday thereafter. But we go into, as I just mentioned, we had guests just stay for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, they came in for a weekend after the holiday. And hopefully we plan to have somebody for Christmas. It gets lighter for sure. I mean, people usually just come out for weekends, shorter stays, just to kind of enjoy the fall, winter season. But what I thought would be strictly sort of a summer destination is we've had bookings every single month of the year. Obviously, the summer is 100%. We get we're booked out. Last 3 years we have been. But we do get with the shoulder months and going into winter, we still get some activity. So we keep it open all summer, winter, spring, and fall.
Awesome. All right. Wonderful. So is how you're running the business now, is it how you envisioned it would be when you were looking to purchase a property?
Not at all. So I think, as I mentioned, this was going to be our second home that we're primarily used as a getaway. We had zero expectations of making this into any sort of business. The best hopes that we had were maybe honey, we'll go be able to rent this out for a month or two in the summer. But we really weren't counting on that. So this was strictly, we got into this get a second home, somewhere kids can play and enjoy. And we threw up on Airbnb. Like I said, if I look back on some of our old pictures, so the listing was in shambles. Looking back on it now, but the expectation was very, very low when we set it. We weren't expecting any income from it to support the mortgage and expenses. We're intending on carrying it on our own, but it has exceeded any expectation that we did or didn't have ever since.
Now, do you feel like you're still able to use it for personal use enough?
That's a great question. We've been sort of maximizing the space, but even with that, even with the bookings, believe it or not, sort of just trying to get all that we can out of the property, we're at about 56 to 60% occupancy. So if you think about half the year the home is vacant. It's usually, as I said, in the shoulder months, and so we're out there. We're out there. We can go throughout every weekend. That's basically free. We go out there and enjoy it. If somebody cancels last minute, that's great, honey. We get a weekend at our home. Obviously, like I said, we've been there. We've spent actually part of COVID when we were just renting out the upper level out there. So we've lived in a home. We've enjoyed it, and we love to share it now with others. I mean, so we made our memories there. We love to go back, but we also love to share it with others and sort of have them make their own memories in the place that we've made so many of ours.
Awesome. Do you think you would ever purchase a second vacation rental?
It would have to. I mean, now I would be looking at it with different eyes than I was, like I said, when I was getting into this property. But if we found the right property, and I'm always still looking, I said I'm always hitting the open house scene. Whether it's for myself or for others, I'm always have my eye out for deals. And this property, believe you me, was on the market for, on and off for like 5 years. It was sitting on the market. Nobody wanted. People passed it up for years. So I looked at the history sort of so then there's out there that I'm always on the hunt for. If we can find something that makes sense, there's some experience now that we have, with expectations. But if it makes sense, would love to get another one. Not sure how I can swing everything with the way I'm running it, but like I said, once I get to that, once I have that problem, I guess I'll address it in time.
Right,
but,
you'll cross that bridge when you come to it. Then, all right.
Exactly.
So, what would be your biggest pet peeve about your vacation rental or about guests?
About guests, it's really feedback. The people that I always ask for feedback, and sometimes I don't. Guests don't like to engage. Some guests I try to reach out to and really engage. Sort of create. We don't. Ever since COVID, we sort of keep it strictly virtual, so check-ins virtual. But I like to try to engage with our guests to create a more memorable experience, to kind of share some local fast food, the place to go eat, place to visit, and some guests don't engage. So I'd love to see guests engage a little more in the process. So it's not, so you get more value out of it. That's really the value proposition, is you have somebody that owns a property, that's lived there, that has sent their kids to school there, to daycare. So if you're looking for a recommendation, you would think I would be the first person they want to turn to, because there's that. But from what I've seen, it's about 50-50. Some guests sort of reach out, and I make myself available. Like I said, we provide a whole manual with a lot of details. I always encourage guests to reach out, ask questions. But that's the one pet peeve. Reach out to your host, and that's how you'll know, if it's a host that's really engaged, that wants to make the experience special. If they interact with you, oftentimes hosts may not, make the first step, but you make the first step. We always try to sort of bridge that divide. Always check in on multiple times throughout the stay. But that's the one thing I said. I'd love to see a little more engagement on the guest side, and maybe it's just past experience with other hosts, but we take the opposite view. It's really that interactive experience throughout your time there, where I can tell you, try Hank's Pumpkin Town, and if you're there in the fall, grab some apples and go apple picking. If you want to check out a museum, I can direct you to the right place as well. Some local nature trails. So it's really I guess the number one thing would be just engage with your host more. Say we're not just a hotel. It's not just a service, pick up and bring my breakfast. We're there to provide you sort of guidance on your trip. It's your first time there, or even if you've been there many times, something that you may not have experienced before.
Sure. All right. So is there any questions that I didn't ask you today that you wish I would have, or that you really want to let people know about your vacation rental or about your experience?
Oh, that's a good one. We've covered a lot of ground, and it's. I'm glad you touched on the reviews, because that's really the one thing that I want to sort of stress is the review process and getting guest feedback. But we did discuss that for quite a bit. I guess that the numbers I would like to go into. I mean, I already mentioned our occupancy. If you asked me more about sort of how we're doing, I mean, from what I've seen in the space, a lot of people are go into and sort of generally just discuss what their their numbers are, what makes sense, and oftentimes people use euphemisms like the numbers make sense. But what does that mean? When you're comparing a business, which is this what this is at this point, it went from a luxury purchase to a business. What numbers make sense? So I think there's it's nice to have candid conversations about how the dynamics of the business. What are the rents, the expenses, the occupancy, how to sort of deal with awkward situations with guests that impact your bottom line. So that's one area. I'm happy to speak with more about it if you're up for it. Or
yeah, please. Why don't we share that? Because not every owner really wants to talk about their numbers and their success or lack of success. So please share.
It's like I said, the expectation was very pretty much nil. We're expecting maybe at best to cover our mortgage, which we're financed the home. Like I said, this wasn't we purchased in 2019. We got it without knowing obviously COVID was coming and how that would play out. And even when it did, we thought we just made the worst investment of our life, because now everybody's locked down. Nobody's ever going to come out and vacation. But believe you me, the opposite was true really quick. So the home has been turned from the expectations of really nothing to now it's something like 3, 4, 5x our expenses in terms of gross annual income. I keep track of all the guest stays. Even at 50%, 50, 60% occupancy, we are covering our expenses 4 or 5-fold every single year. It's been pretty consistent for now, but my expectation always with vacation rentals is you're as good as your last booking and as your future reservations. So the expectation is really for next year. I always start with expectation of 0. That the home will make 0, and if it makes 150,000, that's great. But that's always a default. I never sort of come into this with the expectation that it will that we'll make any money on it. But that's not really the driving force behind why we offer it and how we sort of treat our guests. So while the numbers are important, next obviously because the bank wants their check every month and the utilities and such, but it has to make sense. But at the same time, I think it's nice for for other people that are looking to get into this business. You see so much information out there and social media. I try to comment on some of it, but folks advertise about levering up and really taking out huge loans to go and lever up and get as many properties and steamroll into it. And I would just recommend caution. Like I said, this was an investment that we got into, and we knew we could cover and still can with 0 income. So it's maybe a conservative view. But with that kind of view, I think you get a lot more latitude for growth and being a lot more aggressive on marketing the property and not having to worry about it. Like, hey, look, if we don't make this rental, if somebody cancels on us, we won't be able to make our mortgage payment, and the whole house of cards is going to fall apart. So I think that's the key. And I'm happy to go into some more details. I've spreadsheets. If anybody wants to DM me and go over the numbers, how stuff worked out for us. I think we've been incredibly lucky. I wasn't expecting any of this. It's been tremendous, and hopefully it keeps on going. But the expectation really is you're as good as your next booking, as your last booking, and the next reservation, depending on your cancellation policy. But that's really, if you have that kind of approach, it's very helpful to keep the property, keep your sort of vision on the experience, rather than, hey, I need to have this guest stay because our bottom line is what it is.
Sure. No, that's really good points. And I don't know if you've seen some of the occasional chatter out there these days that bookings are declining. I'm curious what your opinion is on that, and also if you've experienced that.
Sure. So I will. We were all worried actually in the summer, because we often rent out our summers for month-long stays. This is so traditional in our area, where somebody comes out and stays not for a weekend or a week or longer, but it usually stays for a month. And that's pretty much been the case for all of our month-long summer stays up until the summer, where we're stuck with August, which is our best month. No bites really for a month-long rental. So we end up splitting it up, doing shorter sort of stays, week, 2 week long. and did book out completely. And believe it or not, that the shortest stays were actually more profitable than all our prior month long, which is which. But there was a hint of a downtick in our market, and when I talked to real estate brokers, they were recounting to me 40, 50, 60% year-over-year declines in the amount of volume for rentals. But the one thing I would sort of mention is position your property so you are able to offer essentially on the spectrum where you can offer you'll be the very first person out the door. Like if somebody's looking for a property and your competition is 100 properties, price it, but sort of create enough amenities and then price it so you are the first one to get booked, even if it's at a lower margin for your business, so you get booked out, because it's really it's a game of occupancy. There's a certain sort of threshold where I'm sure if you're getting below your break even, you want to it probably doesn't make sense,
Right.
but keeping the occupancy going and I think really keeping the momentum going on social media, and particularly Airbnb, seeing those reviews. If guests see that your property's being stayed at, because they see when the last person stayed at. If you look at the review is not from 3 months ago, it's from this month.
Right.
Last month.
Right.
So I think keeping the momentum, even if you're eating into your margin, if you start with the expectation I said of zero, anything above zero, I guess, or your costs is a good month. It's sort of how you approach it. But I've seen somewhat of a downtick, but in the market in general, but we kept our occupancy where it was, and year over year, a little bit of a decline. I guess COVID was really an unusual year. This is 2021 I'm talking about, where we had a peak of record peak that I don't think we'll ever see again. But that's to be expected. So we're expecting some of a downtick, and that was sort of in line with what we've seen. But it's also finding your market. I think being being strategic about putting yourself in a market that's less price sensitive. Like I said, that might not be easy lift for everybody. And I know folks, I've seen plenty that do long distance Airbnbs. That's nothing I could ever do. Like I said, I can't be, I have to be within driving distance of my home. I'm too neurotic, and then I have to jump in the car, and God forbid something's happening, to get in.
Yeah.
My eyes, not the eyes of the handy. So it's really finding a market, doing a lot of research on the front end, and trying to position yourself then within that market sort of appropriately. So it's really twofold: finding the right market that's before you get into it, and then once you are positioning yourself in and adjusting it as you go along yourself, really, because there's all the price labs and pricing software. It's algorithms. It's not human beings that are doing the calculation. So after a few years, when you do have historical data, you can really look back on your numbers, where your median occupancy is, during 1 month, what rents, what's the lead time. So you get a sense of where your pricing should be, and then you can sort of scale accordingly to kind of hit those numbers. So it takes a while. So when you start, I guess you don't have those numbers, but over time, as you develop, really keep track of your numbers, and then you can position yourself within your local sub-market appropriately to be able to make it through so the downturns. And I think we're actually headed for a sort of an upturn in rentals, because sales are going to go down with the mortgage rates. I mean, it's just first-time home buyers, whether it's vacation or otherwise, are getting priced out of the market. It's double. We closed at 3 and an eighth. I'm getting quoted the same rate, north of 7% now, which almost double our payment. We couldn't afford it now.
Yeah, exactly. Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time today, and thank you for joining us and doing this interview with me. So
thank you so much, Suzanne.